Next question, this one. Actually, it's two questions. I'm going to lump them together. The first one from Green Swede. Can you help bring some attention to the EU initiative that Stop Killing Games just started? I think it's a worthy cause, especially as DF Direct did mention in the past about Ubisoft's The Crew closure. Correct me if I'm wrong. Not going to correct you because you're not wrong. This one from Marcus. Hello, Foundry Men. The Stop Killing Games crowd, it's a crowd, has got an EU petition started, which has managed quite a few signatures in its first week. How would you feasibly suggest regulation to work? Should an MMO being shut down have to share its server tech, or are there other options? Thank you for all your work! ! Alex, this is something that we kind of passionately want to see happen. Mm-hmm. Basically, an end to games just disappearing because there's no sort of ability to continue their upkeep. Mm-hmm. What do you think about this? How do you go about making these games persist when the developer doesn't have the budgets to keep them going?
Right. Right before I answer that, I'm going to say yes. Everyone, if you're eligible to take part in this EU petition, please sign it. I know from the German side, it requires like your kind of identification through an online process. It's okay to do. It's safe. Don't worry about that. I think everyone should sign it. It requires, I think, 1 million signatures to actually be put into kind of like motion in a great way. And it requires from each member state, I think 100,000 signatures for like ratification of like 4 states. That may be an improper quote for me there, but Accursed Farms has a great video about it. I'm definitely a huge supporter of this. I disagree completely with any kind of hand wringing about it from anyone else. Like, this is only going to be good for the consumer, and it doesn't really apply to small developers. Like, let's get that completely clear here. We are not talking about your indie Phil Fish kind of small entrepreneur having an issue with this. This is completely about large scale games that require ridiculous, amounts of infrastructure to already start in the first place and develop. And in that case, like, to come back to Rich's question to me, and the question kind of from the audience here, is that we really do need to give the server tooling and server infrastructure software away once a game has reached end of life to the communities in some capacity, or there's probably other ways to maintain it. I'm not sure at the actual cost of maintaining something like a master server. So I can't say anything about there, but maybe there is some other way to continue it on after the fact that isn't about giving away software, but instead maybe increasing the cost of something to make the master server stay up for something. But in the cases of like the game like The Crew, where it didn't even require the online component at all to be playable, I think it also is going to be great for those games that reach end of life but have a silly sign-in that occurs that prevents the game from really starting. I think that is another thing that this will affect. It'll prevent, at some point of end of life, the ability to a sign-in of a game, making it so you can't play it. I think that's another great thing that this offers us. So support it. And I don't see any problem there. I don't think there's any issues of like innovation being encroached upon here, which I think is another concern here, that people are like, I'm giving away my trade secrets of how I do my server infrastructure. I think there's like hundreds of games doing this. I don't think you're that special, especially after 6 or 10 years of a game being online. So
yeah, I think it's the lifespan thing that's kind of like the clincher.
Yeah.
6 or 10 years after a game has come out, then what have you got to lose? It's going to be outdated by that point. It's not really a problem unless it's something like Battleborn. Do you remember that?
Yes,
that wasn't 6 to 10 years.
Oh my goodness, no. Yeah.
A little shorter.
Oliver?
Yes, I think this is an interesting way to pose this question, because for MMOs in particular, I'm familiar with some of the solutions that have come about. Because for MMOs, often running unofficial servers is not that difficult, like running unlicensed servers for games like World of Warcraft. Oftentimes, the difficulty is more with just finding the correct values for things like damage, like experience, things like this. Getting the correct values in game, that can be more difficult. But I think, if they wanted to expedite that process, they could probably just publish those values and let people go. As far as these unofficial server projects for various games like WildStar, City of Heroes, various old World of Warcraft expansions, things like this, the issue isn't that they have trouble making the servers. That does require some effort. People who are very smart would put a lot of time into this and get it figured out. The issue is they get shut down for licensing reasons, right, as you might expect. But encouragingly, City of Heroes has been given a license for the fan servers. So they create a fan server project. It becomes very popular. They end up getting an official license, and they're able to maintain that server and keep it going as basically the official ongoing server for that game, even though it's no longer being supported. Content's not coming out for it. It's still there. You can still play it. So I think that's very encouraging. But I think in general, as a general solution for these games, I think there is a way to sidestep this issue to some degree, which is just to require a way to play these games offline. Because games like The Division or Diablo 4, you can play a lot of the content, if not the vast majority or all the content, in a single player mode. So it doesn't really require online play at all. You could just, if you need to, for exploit reasons, because these games often get exploits that need to be patched out, or cheating reasons of various other concerns, you could just prevent those players from engaging in online play if they are playing in an offline mode and an offline campaign. Because almost every game experience really these days does work as a single player experience. And it's a little bit ridiculous that you have titles like GT7 launching with always online requirements. I mean, these should just be single player games. The Crew should have just been a single player game that did not have this requirement, or at the very least had an option to disable the requirement, even if that meant giving up a couple things. I'm sure in 2024 you'd rather play The Crew with a couple things missing, maybe the ability not to, you can't play with people online, obviously, things like that, than just not to have it at all. I think that's a much preferable situation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess the question is, does it require the government to step in to make regulations to say, hey, your game does actually have to function at some point in the future without any kind of online infrastructure? Or should it be the industry itself that just takes responsibility for this, recognizes the importance of longevity of the games, and actually just makes sure it happens?
Mm-hmm.
I support this campaign, but I just think the industry needs to step up and take responsibility here, to respect the fact that games should persist for as long as possible, if not forever, And if it does mean open sourcing server architectures when you're closing down your games, I'm going to assume there's a cost associated with that as well. But factor it in from launch, make it established practice.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a bit sad that you've got to basically bring in the EU to force people to do this when it just makes common sense. It should just happen. But, if it requires it, then I guess so.
So be it.